Our scripture reading today is Genesis 19, verses 12 to 17 and 23 to 26. This is our last Sunday on the theme and the events surrounding the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And we're going to take a look at this now from kind of Lot's perspective and follow Lot more specifically through this. And so the verses that I've chosen are really just a sampling of verses I'm going to reference here today, but it's kind of the heart of it and will get us moving in the right direction here this morning. So verses in Genesis 19. The two men said to Lot, "Do you have anyone else here, sons-in-law, sons or daughters, or anyone else in the city who belongs to you? Get them out of here, because we are going to destroy this place. The outcry to the Lord against its people is so great that he has sent us to destroy it." So Lot went out and spoke to his sons-in-law, who were pledged to marry his daughters. He said, "Hurry and get out of this place, because the Lord is about to destroy the city." But his sons-in-law thought he was joking. With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, "Hurry, take your wife and your two daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished." When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and his two daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives, don't look back, and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away." By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities and the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities, and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt. May the Lord add his blessing to the reading and hearing of his word. There is a whole new profession in the world that didn't exist. When no one asked me when I was graduating from high school or when I was in college, "Hey, what do you want to be when you," well, they did ask me, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" None of them ever said, "Have you ever thought about being an influencer?" It's a thing now. It's been a thing for a little while. I still have a hard time wrapping my brain around the fact that that's some people's jobs. I'm an influencer, and I do it on social media. People do it. They make lots of money, and sometimes they have a lot of influence too. But I think this is a good question, because this question of influence is an important question, and it's an important question for the church, for followers of Jesus, for us to always be asking ourselves, are you an influencer or are you just influenced? Are you having an impact and making a difference in the lives and the culture and the atmosphere around you, or are you just taking on the characteristics of the culture in which you live? This is an incredibly important question. And I think it's a question that's at the heart of the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah and that whole region. Let's take a look. We remember this from several chapters ago and several months ago, that Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. How they got there was, again, Abram gave Lot the choice. We got to divide up. There's too many of us. We got too many flocks. We got to divide up. Do you want the lowlands in the Jordan River Valley, or do you want the highlands, kind of rockier, hillier area up here for you to settle? And Lot looked down and said, "I want the lowlands in the Jordan Valley." And he pitched his tent. He set up his household near the city of Sodom. And at that point, Lot could have said, "I want to have an impact in Sodom and Gomorrah. I want to influence Sodom and Gomorrah. I've heard Abram tell me all about what God told him, that God told him, leave this land of your ancestors. Follow me to a place." "Well, where are we going, God? I'll let you know when we get there." "Will it be good? You'll see when we get there." And we got here, and this is it. And this is it. And God brought Abram through all of these difficulties. He's blessed him, made him a wealthy man, and has promised him that through him all the nations of the world will be blessed. And I want to start that now. I want to be a blessing to the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. I want to be a blessing, and I want to help them see and know how good it is to follow the Lord and the Lord's ways. That could have been what Lot did, but it wasn't. It wasn't. Whether it was in his mind at any level, we do not really know at all. But it's certainly not what he did. It's certainly not. Lot, after having spent, we don't know exactly, probably 10, 15 years or more in Sodom and Gomorrah, and he went from living near Sodom to living in the city. He went from being a total stranger and newcomer to being one of the judges, one of the leaders of the city. That's why he was at the city gate when the angelic visitors came. That's where the judges went. The leaders hung out and they listened to people and talked to people and greeted people and made decisions and those kinds of things. Became a leader in the city of Sodom. But in all of that time, he had zero impact. He had zero influence. Remember, Abraham said, if there's 10 righteous people there, God, will you save Sodom and Gomorrah? Will you spare them for the sake of 10 righteous people? And after all of those years of Lot being there, Lot who knew the promises God had made Abram, who knew the blessings that God had given Abram, who knew the blessing of following God's ways and living God's ways, who knew all of those things firsthand, eyewitness experience, part of it. Part was saved by Abram through the power of God when Lot and his family had been taken as political captives. With all of that background, Lot had zero influence in that city. Zero influence for good anyway. Instead, Lot and his family simply became like the culture in which they lived. They were influenced rather than being influencers. Lot failed to influence his community and his family. Failed to influence his community. So his family, here's what family we know of. We had Lot, had Lot's wife. Lot and his wife had 2 daughters. That's 4. Each of their daughters was engaged. That's 6. They were 60% of the way to the 10 people they needed for God to have mercy on an entire civilization. 10 people away, four people away. There were 6 of them. I've got trouble with my fingers. There were 6 of them. They were 4 people away. And they didn't have it. In fact, I kind of think they were 10 people away, to be honest. That chapter 19 finishes saying, God saying he spared Lot for Abraham's sake, not for Lot's own righteousness. Instead of influencing the community, they were just influenced by it. Instead of helping people around them put their faith in God, they were putting their faith in the culture of that community. Instead of helping those folks live the way of God, they were living the way of that community. They had zero influence. He had zero influence on his family. His sons-in-law, his future sons-in-law, and they called them sons-in-law. It's kind of like when you're engaged in those cultures, it was a much more serious commitment than being engaged in our culture. So that's why even though they weren't married yet, they could still be called sons-in-law. There was that much of a commitment. These men, his daughters, were going to marry. When Lot tells them, we got to go, they thought it was a joke. They thought it was just that Lot was someone to be laughed at in all of that. No influence, no impact on them. I mean, this was the God that had saved Lot and his family when they were taken as political prisoners. And they had so little impact. His own family just thought he was nuts. Thought he was a joke when he said that. His own wife, who had come to love the culture and the city of Sodom so much that as they were miles away on the edges of the mountain and the city was being destroyed, Lot's wife was longing to return to that place. It wasn't just she glanced back over her shoulder. It's that she wanted to go back to that way of life. She wanted to return to that culture. She wanted to return to that way of doing things. And so she died too. And then they get up in the mountains, and now it's just Lot and his daughters. And they do unspeakable things to their father so that they can carry on their own families. No impact. No impact on his sons-in-law, no impact on his wife, no impact on his daughters. They had completely absorbed the corrupt culture in which they lived. Lot failed to influence. Lot failed to influence his community and his family. Why? Why was he such a failure? I think it's because he focused on the wrong thing. Lot lost his focus, or maybe he never had the right focus. But Lot focused on the wrong things. When Abram was giving him the choice, Abram could have made the choice himself, but Abram said to Lot, you pick where you want to live, I'll take what's left. And Lot picked the Jordan Valley. Why? Let's go back and look at it again. Lot looked around and he saw that the whole plain of the Jordan towards Zoar was well watered, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt. So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. Lot said, I can make money there. That like the land of Eden and like Egypt, meant there's prosperity to be had there. That's good fertile land. I can raise lots of flocks. I can grow food. I can make a lot. This was a financially motivated decision, a prosperity motivated decision. This was, I want to go there because I can get good stuff from there. Remember, though, why God had called Abram to leave his homeland and come to this promised land? Not so Abram could get, and his family could get good stuff from there, although God did give them good stuff. But he brought them there so they could be a blessing, and eventually a blessing to every nation on earth. But Lot wasn't looking at the Jordan Valley thinking, how can I go down there and be a blessing there? When Abraham gave him that decision, his thought wasn't, you know what, let me choose the place where I can have the greatest impact to help people live in God's way. It was, I can make a lot of money there. I can get good stuff there. I can get good things for me and for my family. Lot lost his focus, if he ever had it. His focus was not on how to be a blessing. His focus was not on how to serve God. His focus was not on how can I help other people live in God's ways. His focus was how can I maximize benefits for me and my family. And the way to maximize benefits for him and his family was to go along and get along. Man, their digs are doing great here. A lot of money, people living in ease, and they know how to do it. I'll do it like they do it. And he did it like they did it. And his family got what they got. No influence, no impact. I want to put someone out here by way of comparison. Anyone know the name Eric Liddell? Is that a name you're familiar with? I knew you would. I knew you'd know that. Anyone? You and I watch a lot of the same movies, I think. Chariots of Fire is an old movie. My opinion, my humble opinion, this is not Thus Saith the Lord. I think it's the best sports movie ever made. True story. And it focused, one of the main characters is Eric Liddell. He's kind of a mirror image of Lot. Eric Liddell had his focus. He was in school and university in Edinburgh in Scotland, training to be a missionary. He was going to go to China and be a missionary. This was in the 1920s. But Eric Liddell was also very gifted in athletics. He played rugby for Scotland's national team and was very good at it. And he was very fast. He was a very fast runner. And so as the 1924 Olympics that were to be held in Paris, as those approached, Eric Liddell, much to the chagrin of his sister and some of his others, close friends and people that were around him, he put a pause on his missionary training to go to the Olympics and compete in the Olympics. And he qualified. He qualified in the 100-meter dash to go to the Olympics in Paris in 1924. And his sister and friend came to him and said, we think you've lost your focus, Eric. You need to be focused on the mission field, not distracted by sports and glory and competition and cameras and fame. You're losing your focus. And Eric said, I'm not losing my focus. I'm not losing my focus. I love what he said in the movie. I don't know if it's a direct quote or not. I hope it is. He said, God made me, I know God made me for a purpose. God made me for mission. God made me for China. But God also made me fast. And when I run, I feel His glory. One of my favorite lines ever, anywhere. It's good. He was focused. And he went. to compete in the Olympics. And on the way there, he was tested right off the bat, because part of his Christian tradition was a very, very, very high level honoring of the Sabbath. You did not work on the Sabbath. The Sabbath was God's day, and all you did on the Sabbath day was honor God. You went to worship, you went to church, you didn't do anything else. Except the qualifying heats for the 100-meter dash were on a Sunday. And so Eric announced to his teammates and to the leaders of the British Olympic team, I can't run on Sunday. I'm not going to run on Sunday. And he was their only person, as far as I know. He was their only chance at medaling in the 100 meters. And he backed out. He said, I'm not going to do it. And all of this pressure came on him to compete. And they sat him down in a room surrounded by very wealthy, very powerful, very influential people, including the Crown Prince, the Prince of Wales, the Crown Prince of England himself, his future king, to persuade him to compete on the Sabbath. I've got a video clip of that. I might need you to turn the volume up on this, Don, and we'll see that it's all dialogue and it's fairly quiet. Let's see how it goes.
Lord Birkenhead has advised us as to your attitude towards your participation in the 100 meters heats. Or would your non-participation be more accurate?
It would, sir, yes.
We were also consulted as to the correct manner in which to approach the French.
Something we just can't allow to happen. Going cap in hand to the frogs of all people. Simply out of the question.
Simple matter of national dignity, Little. Being a patriot, I'm sure you understand.
Well, I must say, sir, I felt it was an impractical suggestion from the start.
Well, why didn't you say so, man? As an athlete, you value economy of effort.
I wanted to run. And I was desperate enough to try anything.
Well, all that being understood, we decided to invite you in for a little chat to see if there's any way that we can help resolve the situation.
There's only one way to resolve the situation. That's for this man to change his mind and run.
Don't state the obvious, Cadogan. We've to explore ways in which we can help this young man to reach that decision.
I'm afraid there are no ways, sir. I won't run on the Sabbath, and that's final. I intended to confirm this with Lord Birkenhead tonight, even before you called me up in front of this inquisition of yours.
Don't be impertinent, Little.
The impertinence lies, sir, with those who seek to influence a man to deny his beliefs.
On the contrary, Little, we're appealing to your beliefs in your country and your king. Your loyalty to them.
Hear, hear. In my day, it was king first, God after.
Yes, and the war to end wars bitterly proved your point.
God made countries. God makes kings and the rules by which they govern. And those rules say that the Sabbath is his. And I, for one, intend to keep it that way.
Mr. Little, you're a child of your race, as I am. We share a common heritage, a common bond, a common loyalty. There are times when we're asked to make sacrifices in the name of that loyalty. Without them, our allegiance is worthless. As I see it, for you, this is such a time.
Sir, God knows I love my country, but I can't make that sacrifice.
Little, it's like a mirror image of Lot. He was focused. And his focus was not on what's good for me. What can I get? What can it add to my wealth, my privilege, my position, my status? None of that. His focus was on God. What does God want? What does God want from me? And I will do that no matter what the cost. No matter what the cost. And I will trust that God will bless me in whatever way God sees fit and God sees appropriate. Now, if you know the story, you know that Little eventually did run in the Olympics, not because he was willing to violate his conscience and run on the Sabbath, but because one of his teammates decided to give up his spot in the 400-meter dash, and there was no heat on Sunday. And so instead of running in the 100 meters, Eric ran in the 400 meters, and Eric won gold medal in the 400 meters. And God blessed him in the eyes of the whole world. And then the next year in 1925, Eric went to China as a missionary, where Eric had a long and significant career in ministry. Not significant in the sense of drawing huge crowds, but significant in the sense of the impact on the lives of people who said he was a tremendous influence in their faith, in their growth, in their following of God. And he was in China when World War II started. He was in China when Japan invaded, and he was sent to a Japanese prison camp. Not a good place to be. And that's where he died, in a prison camp in China, held by the Japanese. And you know what he did while he was there? He preached sermons, and he led Bible studies. And when someone was hungry, he gave up his food. And when someone needed medicine, he gave them his medicine. All the way through, Eric Liddell kept his focus right where it needed to be, on God, on what does God want me to be doing to be a blessing to others. And he had an impact. He had an impact. I would love to know. I don't know if there's any way of finding out. Maybe it'll be in the kingdom of heaven. I'm meeting some sisters and brothers from China who were followers of Jesus Christ in my lifetime because of what Eric did in his lifetime. That's the kind of impact we can have, what it means to be an influencer rather than just being influenced. But Lot failed. And his failure had massive implications. When we fail to focus on God, when we fail to be an influencer and instead are just influenced by the culture around us, that failure has implications that are both horizontal and vertical. Horizontal meaning in our own time period, in our own lifetime. We've already talked about the horizontal implications. Lot's wife, Lot's sons-in-law, Lot's daughters, and every single person that Lot ever had lunch with, went to their house for dinner, shared in business associations with on the plains of Sodom and Gomorrah, lost their lives, or their lives were otherwise destroyed by Lot's failure of influence. But it also had vertical. That impact goes over time. And we don't know exactly, or at least, hard to find out in the United States right now, the vertical, the influence over time that Eric Liddell had. But we know the influence over time that Lot's failure had. The daughters, Lot's daughters who had children by him, those children, their descendants became nations that stayed in the land of Canaan. And when Abraham's descendants left Egypt, and were on their way back to the promised land, Lot's descendants stood in their way and fought them to keep them from coming back. Our failure to have an impact doesn't just affect us and the people around us right now. It can affect people for generations and generations and generations to come. So what does this mean for us? What are the practical applications for us here? Just a couple of things that I want us to take note of. One is we need to be aware of our own limits, including our capacity to influence. See, it's easy to throw stones at Lot. I'm not doing this to throw stones at Lot, but to see the possibilities to see what happened to Lot so we can avoid it in our own life if we can. Because Lot could have avoided this for his family and himself at least, if perhaps he had sat back and said, you know what? What's going to happen to me and my family if we go there? Can I really be an influence there? Or will I really become like them? And will my family just become like them and face the same, adopting the same destructive mindsets, the same destructive lifestyles, and facing the same destructive future that they face? Beware of our own capacity to influence, particularly at times our lack of capacity. Because there are some places we can be an influence and some places we can't. And the decision on that is a decision that has to be made by prayer, not simply by rule. There are some churches and church groups that make it by rule, and they isolate themselves and insulate themselves, and they insist on having a separate kind of subculture, and we won't even interact with people outside of that culture if we can avoid it, and we'll never go to a restaurant that sells alcohol or never buy from a grocery store that sells alcohol. We'll never hang out with people. My mom was, she tasted a little bit of that. Her family was very strict in some ways. She never, there was never a deck of playing cards in her house growing up. And individual, personal policies like that is not the issue. But God does not call us to cut ourselves off from the culture that's around us. Otherwise, we can't be an influence. We can't have an impact. So Jesus said, well, we're told of Jesus that he was a friend of sinners. Jesus went to the houses of people that were known to be sinful people. He ate with them. He became friends with them. He invited them to follow him. And he calls us to do the same, to cross cultural lines, to cross cultural barriers, not to live in silos, not to wrap ourselves, our families, or our churches in bubble wrap and try to keep all the bad people out and away at arm's distance, but to embrace folks in the culture, folks that are righteous people and folks that are sinful people, and love them and welcome them and be in relationship with them, to seek them out. But there's a tension between that and Lot pitching his tent near Sodom, in which we have to ask ourselves on an ongoing basis, is this a relationship in which I can be an influence or which I will simply be influenced? There's some easy examples. I don't want to spend too much time on this. I'm going to give you two easy examples to kind of get a sense of it. If there's a person who is 2 years sober, recovering from decades of alcohol addiction, the local bar is probably not your mission field, right? Don't go there. If you're just, if you're 2 years, some folks that are 10 or 15 years sober won't go there. They say, I can go there, but I know that they will influence me. I won't influence them. I'll simply go back to being what I was, being what folks there are. I won't influence them. They'll influence me. That's wisdom. That's wisdom. You find someplace else to be an influence. The nice thing about the world is there's sinners everywhere, all over the place. We can make friends of sinners anywhere. The other place where I saw this over and over again was when I was working with kids in the juvenile detention center up in Seneca County. And they would come, they'd be there for a while, they swear they're never going to change, never going to come back here again. And 6 months, 9 months, 12 months later, they're back. 9 times out of 10, as they told me their stories, it went something like that. Things were going great. I decided when I left I wasn't going to go hang out with my old friends anymore, but they're my friends, and I want to hang out. So I was hanging out with them at school. I was like, well, I'll just hang out with them at school, but I won't go to their house. Well, I went to their house. It's like, well, I'll go there, but I'm just not, when they're passing the pot around, I'm not going to take any of the pot. And they took the pot, and then they're smoking the pot, and they're doing all the same stuff they were doing before, because they put themselves back into an environment where they had no chance of having a meaningful influence on the people around them, then every chance that those people around them would simply pull them right back to what they didn't want to be. We have to be discerning. And it's not a matter of rule making, it's a matter of prayer. It's a matter of talking with God about it and people around us that are wise enough to say, yeah, don't go there. You go hang out. And it could be, whether it's, it could be it could be relationships. It could be it could be a single relationship. Yeah, every time you get it with that person, you become this other person that is just, don't do it. We've got to make those kind of decisions. We've got to be discerning enough to see how relationships affect us so that we can see this is a place where I can be of influence, but this is a place where I will simply be dragged down. I will be influenced. Those are hard decisions to make, and those are best made in prayer with wise people around us who know us and love us well. So we can ask them and ourselves? To what degree can I keep my focus on Jesus and His call in any given situation? That's the thing. Because maybe Lot was never going to influence Sodom. Maybe Lot's best decision would have been, you know what? I can make a lot of money down in the Jordan Valley. But if I go hang out down there, yeah, I'm just going to want to join right in. I think I'll stay up here in the hills. I'll let Uncle Abram go down there. He's better at that than I am, at not getting caught up in that stuff. That could have been Lot's decision. He might never have had an influence. There might have been no chance that he was ever going to have any meaningful influence on Sodom and Gomorrah. But think how different his family would have been. Think how different his descendants would have been if Lot had made that kind of decision. One last person I want to talk about as another actual current example of someone who's not like Lot. And that is Maria Corina Machado. You've heard that name? I suspect if you follow the news at all or social media much, you've heard of Maria Corina Machado. She is currently living in hiding in Venezuela. She is by birth. Her family was wealthy, business folks in Venezuela. That's what she wanted to be. She wanted to be an engineer. And she became an engineer. She went to school to become an industrial engineer. I don't know exactly what industrial engineers do, but I just the name tells me I'm not smart enough for that job. And she was good at it. And that's what she wanted to do. That's what she wanted to be. Life was going on great, but politics in her country was going bad and had been bad and was getting worse. And people kept saying, you should step in, you should step in, you should do something. And she did. She eventually became a politician, pushing for democracy, pushing for freedom, pushing for free enterprise in her country. And the leaders of her government and the main person, Maduro, a tyrannical dictator who trumped up a bunch of charges against her. She's been accused of every crime you can think of. When the election time rolled around in 2024, she wanted to run for president of Venezuela. But Maduro and his regime said that she could not run. She was not allowed to appear on the ballot. She could not run for election. She was a criminal. She could not be president. And so she convinced a friend, an old guy, to run in her name as a proxy. His name would be on the ballot, but everyone would know that a vote for him was really a vote for Maria Machado. Anyone know what percentage of the vote she got? 90%. 90. I mean, I can't even imagine that. I've never even heard of a school board election getting 90%, much less president of a country. 90% of a vote when she wasn't even legally allowed to run. And Maduro was done with her and declared her an outlaw and a traitor, and she lives in hiding, and most of her supporters don't even know where she is right now. But she continues to post on social media. She continues to assert that Maduro's government is failing and will fall, that democracy and freedom will prevail in Venezuela, and that good things will come to her people there. Now, here's the thing. Machado she's not a pastor. She's not a missionary like Eric Liddell. And she's not a nomad like Abraham, following God from place to place. She's an engineer and a businesswoman and a politician, but she is a staunch Christian. Her version, the tradition she grew up in happens to be Catholic because that's the dominant Christian tradition in Venezuela. But she prays throughout her country. She prays for her people. One of the ways her people primarily show their support for her is whenever she goes someplace, they'll give her rosaries. And rosaries, it's a tool that Catholics use for prayer. You use I'm not sure exactly, but each bead reminds you to pray for a different thing. And she's collected these rosaries all over, and she prays them, and she prays for her people, and she sees her struggle, and has openly said, it's not just political, it's not just business, this is a spiritual struggle that God has given her. And she's put herself at risk. She's put her family at risk. Her children have had to flee the country. Well, I don't know whether they fled, but they're not in the country. I don't know whether I suspect part of it is fleeing, but her children are at risk. She's at risk. She has to live in hiding. But she's had such an influence and such an impact on so many people because she kept her focus. She kept her focus on the mission and the ministry and the calling. For her, it was freedom and democracy. To lead her country back into that. And instead of going along to get along, instead of seeking the good that came from participating with the regime, she stood against it. And it's cost her a lot. But she's being an influencer rather than being influenced. This is the question that we all have. Not all of us are going to have a chance to win a Nobel Prize. I can virtually guarantee you I'm not going to win a Nobel Prize. It would be startlingly surprising. That's all right. I'll leave that to other folks. I just want to have an influence on my family and my friends and my community. I want people to feel like they've been blessed rather than that I've just gotten something from them. That somehow in small ways or large, they know that God loves them because of what I do or what I say, that they're built up and encouraged. And we all have this opportunity. We all have this choice. Maybe we might have some future social media influencers in here. I don't know. I suspect it would be the two youngest people here that are the most likely to become social media. And you want to be a social media influencer? No? Okay. All right. You want to be a social? No? All right. No social media influencers. That's all right. But we all have the choice, whether we're on social media or not, whether we'll be an influencer or whether we'll just be influenced. Let's follow Eric Little. Let's follow Machado and influence those around us in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.